Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett, astrolonaut of More Than Astrology, here to take a look at the soul songs or birth charts for the four principal candidates of the current United States presidential election. And specifically, we're going to look at the feminine and the masculine impulses for these four candidates as shown by Venus and Mars on their birth charts. We're also going to look at the intent of the global goddess that each was born to participate with, as shown by the Venus Synodic Cycle. What the heck is a Venus Synodic Cycle? We'll just look into that quickly right now. Today is Sunday, the day of the sun, April 10th, 2016. I'm recording this at about 10:45 a.m. in West Seattle, Washington, where I live, with the sun in Aries, here in the 22nd degree, conjunct Uranus and Eris, and the moon in Gemini. So to speak about synodic cycles, well, synod means meeting, okay? And so, for example, with the moon has its sidereal cycles. It's 27.3 days, the amount of time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth and therefore move through every degree of the zodiac. But there's also the synodic cycle, synod meaning meeting. We usually see this as Earth, Moon, Sun, in other words, a new moon. And because the Earth is also moving around the Sun, this takes longer than the moon sidereal period of 27.3 days. New moon to new moon, 29.5 days. And so though this moon is in Gemini, the sun in Aries, the cycle, or the synodic cycle, the current moon cycle or month, began with the new moon on April 7th. So even in a couple weeks, if I look ahead after the sun has ingressed Taurus and the moon's in Sag at that time, I'm still going to look back to the previous new moon, which was April 7th in Aries, to kind of determine the intent of the moon cycle, Aries new moon, right? So there's also, in a way, a new Venus. And we could see this at a very similar imagery for the start point, Earth, Venus, Sun. This happens in the middle of Venus's retrograde period. Venus stations retrograde as she's passing the Earth. In the very middle of those 40 days and 40 nights of the Venus retrograde, brings her into an interior or inferior conjunction with the Sun. Earth, Venus, Sun. All right, so I can go from this time, April 10th, 2016, and just look at when Venus was last conjunct the Sun with Venus retrograde. And this was August 15th in Leo, the 23rd degree of Leo. Now, many would begin the Venus Synodic Cycle, which is 584 days at that point. Shamanic astrology, the paradigm, which in many senses is the stock of my starry stew, the paradigm visioned forth by Daniel Gemario and Kaylin Castell, looks as the Sumerians and the Mayan astronomers did at Venus's heliacal rising for the start point. What heliacal rising means, it's the time when we can first see, in this example, Venus in the east. Okay, so she has to separate herself far enough from the sun to rise before the sun, such that we can see her light before the sunrise glare takes it from our view. The Venus heliacal rising tends to happen about 7 to 8 days after her interior conjunction or her retrograde conjunction to the sun. This particular cycle brought the heliacal rising on August 22nd. You can see Venus here at 18.5 Leo is now over 10 degrees from the sun. So that morning, Venus rose before the sun did, and we could see her light. All right, so heliacal rising of this current cycle beginning in the 19th degree of Leo. Either way you cut it, we're currently in a Venus-Leo synodic cycle. So what does that mean? Today shows us Venus in Aries. All right, we also see Mercury in her sign of Taurus across from Juno. This is kind of a strange glyph of Juno in this brilliant software called Intrepid. Juno, asteroid goddess of relationship, retrograde in Scorpio. And Mercury, our consciousness, is coming to take a look at that energy from across the table. Venus here in Aries, okay? So Venus as a statement of divine feminine essence. Now that's kind of a newer image of the divine feminine in the astrological fold. The oldest telling I've found of it by written word was in Alice Howell's Jungian Archetypes in Astrology. And this is how shamanic astrology works with the feminine essence and with Venus, with the masculine essence and with Mars. And this is something that a lot of astrological paradigms are doing now. I mean, I see them just in their symbols and their true glyphs. Venus is the circle of spirit over the cross of matter. She's breathing the spirit of the sun into matter. And the old glyph for Mars doesn't have that arrow on it. It was the cross of matter over the circle of spirit. And in a sense, Mars, our neighbor outside on the way away from the sun, is then breathing spirit back into matter, sending it out into interstellar space through the function of the other outer planets. All right, so for me, Venus and the yin and the feminine is the inhale of spirit, and Mars and the yang and the masculine is the exhale of spirit. One of the many ways we can play with these incredibly infinite symbols of astrological wisdom. So today we find Venus in Aries, all right? So we're talking about the pioneer goddess, the warrior goddess, the protector goddess, the leader, the goddess in self, these many things. And so that's Venus today in Aries. And yet she's in this quest that began in August of 2015 with new Venus for the Leo energies. And this is like the energy of the global goddess and her intent that today's Venus and every day's Venus within this 584-day Leo Synodic Cycle from August 2015 until March of 2017, every day's Venus is here to participate with that. So we can also ask, okay, well, where is Venus in this cycle? And this Intrepid software has a really wonderful function that Adam Gainsbourg worked with Jeff Close of Intrepid to bring forth called Sky Engine. So I can look at the Sky Engine today, and it's really brilliant. It allows me to look at this Venus cycle from the point of view of several different paradigms. Heroic Journey is Gary Caton's work, Shamanic Astrology, Daniel Gemario, Kaylin Castell, Soul Sign, Adam Gainsbourg, and Traditional, which was written up by Deborah Holding. So we're going to work with the Shamanic Astrology timeline, as I do, and we'll look at Venus for right now. It'll take a second to come up. Maybe a few seconds, and here we go. All right, so what does all this mean? First of all, let me show you the sky graphic. This is Venus, this is the horizon here in Venus today. So what happens in the Venus cycle is she has her heliacal rise when she pops up above the horizon and shows her light for the first time during her retrograde period as she shifted from an evening star at the end of her cycle. She retrogrades and she comes and she's born as morning star. She pretty quickly rises up to her height, and then she slowly descends. And when she comes within 10 degrees of the sun, she moves under the beams, or what we call in the underworld in shamanic astrology. She spends about 60 days on average, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter, not visible. And then she shows herself in the western sky. And then she climbs to her height in the west, before she descends and retrogrades, and the whole thing starts over, this whole quest taking 584 days, and then a new cycle begins. So in August 2015, we were here. She rose up to her height in October, and she started descending, and right now she's at this place where she's about to pull within 10 degrees of the sun and descend below the horizon. And you know what, I will show you these dates compared to this timeline for the current Venus Synodic Cycle. So you can see these dates of September 6th as the crown chakra. What the heck does that mean? Well, this comes from an imagery of working with this Venus cycle in accordance with the great Sumerian story of Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth. Inanna, and the story brought forth by the Sumerians, who also brought forth the oldest astronomical records that are currently known, the Venus tablets of Amasuduka. The story tracks Venus's movement with the Earth and the Sun, the Venus Synodic Cycle. And in the story, Inanna descends into the underworld. She passes through these 7 gates. At the first, she removes her crown, and at the last, or the 7th, she removes her red robe. The 7 gates correlate to the human energetic systems of the chakras, and that's why it's color-coded on that map that I've shown. So we are currently at the place in the Venus Synodic Cycle where she has moved not only through the release of the root chakra energies, because on the way down we start from crown and move to root, removing the clutter, but Venus at this time has also moved through a kind of rare 8th gate that shamanic astrology calls the death by intent gate, because when Venus descends into the underworld, and Inanna in the story, there's a death and a rebirth, and then she ascends and comes back up, reclaiming her goods, starting from the root chakra and moving up to the crown, when then the goddess Venus, Inanna, is fully equipped with her goods, her adornments, the royal me, or holy me, as it's stated in the story of Inanna, and she's in her strength. And then she begins the quest again, starting in a new sign. So we're currently in a Leo Venus Synodic Cycle. The last one from January 2014 to August 2015 was Capricorn. The next one that will begin in March of 2017, Aries, and it's like that. And over the course of 8 Earth years, 13 Venus years, Venus and the Earth make 5 of these Venus interior conjunction kisses, new Venuses, so it makes a beautiful pentagram around the zodiac. And the current 5 places or archetypes that the goddess is pursuing at our time now are Gemini, Capricorn, Leo, Aries, and Scorpio. They slowly shift, they slowly retrograde. Pretty soon in a theater called U, 2 of the Venus vertices of the pentagram will shift from Aries to Pisces, and before that from Scorpio to Libra. And I've been sharing a lot about that and will continue to do so in a project that's online and free if you want to check it out, called the 13th Flower. Alright, so a lot of technique there, but that was necessary introduction before we look not only into Venus and Mars and the presidential candidates' charts, but also look to where they were in the Venus cycle. By the way, these gates of descent and the removal of the 7 royal me, or the adornments, or the clearing of the clutter of the chakra systems, they are symbolized when the crescent moon finds Venus in the morning sky. And then as she rises in the west, every time the crescent moon about once a month comes and finds Venus in the sunset sky, that's reclaiming the goods. Okay, so here in this map on Sky Engine, when you see VL, that's Venus Luna. Alright, so the first one, the removal of the crown, the removal of the third eye, the removal of the throat chakra, and when I say removal, clearing the clutter, and we cruise down until we get through the root chakra, death and rebirth, coming back up, reclaiming the root chakra, reclaiming the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, the heart, on and on and on. This is the way that shamanic astrology works with this. This is the way that Gary Caton works with this in his heroic journey quest, or his heroine's journey in the sense of Venus. Adam Gainsbourg's The Light of Venus and the 13 Phases of Venus, it's a bit of a different trip, but I'm going to present this to you according to the spiritual practice, the vision of shamanic astrology. The timings for shamanic astrology and Heroine's Journey by Gary Caton can be a little bit different. So we're going to look at shamanic astrology's imagery of this global goddess quest for all four of these frontrunners for the United States presidential election coming our way in 2016 with inauguration in 2017. We'll look at Venus as the feminine and Mars as the masculine in their birth chart with a focus on the feminine, and we'll also look at this Venus overtone or the global goddess quest that they were here to participate with. All right, so let me clear this out and we'll go to our first chart. Now, before I do, let me just say that we are in a Leo Venus quest. All right, so Leo and Leo Venus, we're talking about the queen. We're talking about the solar feminine. We're talking about bright radiance of a natural leader. Hopefully, we're talking about honor and courage and chivalry, confidence, yeah, pride. That is not arrogance. Lions roll in pride after all. Creative manifestation, yeah. These beautiful essences of higher octave Leo. All right, there's a lot of lower octave Leo we can also talk about, and perhaps that will show itself to us in this quest. So with Venus in a Leo cycle, well, is this the return of the queen? Is this the return of the feminine essence? Every 8 years we will have a Leo cycle come in. It hasn't always been Leo, this particular vertex of the Venus pentagram. In fact, the pentagram very slowly over time retrogrades through the constellations and the signs of the zodiac, spending about 104 years on average in a quest to integrate the energies of one particular sign. So this current Leo vertex of the Venus pentagram, it retrograded from Virgo, either in the 1974-1975 cycle, if you work with heliacal rising as the start point, as shamanic astrology does, or in the 1991-92 cycle, if you work with the interior conjunction point to begin the cycles. All right, so the current Leo cycle, all right, the roaring lioness came from Virgo, priestess, independent connection to spirit. All right, undependence is one of my favorite images for the Virgo intent. And that Virgo cycle, about 104 years before, was a Libra cycle. Now, and I find this to be very important when we're speaking about the United States and this kind of thing. When the Declaration of Independence was signed, and many people therefore use that date of July 4th, 1776 as the United States birth date, Venus was in Cancer, but she was in a overtone or a global goddess quest of the Libra energies, balance, communication, relationship, partnership, diplomacy, these kinds of things. And it wasn't fully functioning, right? I mean, I like to say that just because these men were wearing wigs when they signed that piece of paper, that doesn't mean the feminine was in the house, all right? So these rights of the feminine, in a sense, we've had to fight for these and bring them back. Now, it's very interesting that when the Freedom statue, the 19.5-foot statue of the goddess that lives on top of the Capitol building in the United States, when the Freedom statue was erected much later in time, we were also in a Libra Venus Synodic cycle. All right? When the first Seneca Falls Convention was held, the convention of the suffrage movement, of women fighting for their right to vote. Stanton, Katie, Ross, many of these very strong women. Well, when the Seneca Falls Convention was held, Venus was also in a Libra Synodic cycle and reaching maturity in it because she had been there for some time. When the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, women's right to vote, Venus in that same cycle, though now it had shifted into Virgo, a Virgo Venus overtone cycle, independence, undependence, priestess nature, and now that cycle has shifted into Leo. All right, so hopefully that's not too confusing, but I think the principal point here that I'm trying to make is this current Venus Leo Synodic cycle, All right, used to be Virgo, used to be Libra. It's the same cycle that was alive during the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the erection of the Freedom Statue above the Capitol building, the timing of the Seneca Falls Convention, and the ratification of the 19th Amendment, women's right to vote. Vocabulary. All right, so let's look at the charts for the presidential elects. And if this is a time where the roaring lioness is coming forth, this current Leo Venus Synodic Cycle, which will be totally alive come the time of the presidential election in November 2016. In fact, at that time, Venus will be high and bright in the evening sky and reclaiming much of her goods. The goddess sitting on the throne once again. Well, does this mean that the feminine energy is ready to roar forth? And are we talking about the emergence of the queen? All right, so maybe we'll start with Hillary Clinton because she is a woman. Now, and this is going to bring some of my personal biases in, but does that mean because Hillary Clinton is a woman that she is more feminine than the other candidates? And that's a really brilliant question because we're not talking about boys and girls when we talk about the yang and the yin. Yeah? So maybe those words are a little bit less focused than masculine and feminine, but we all know we all have feminine and masculine energies, whether we are a woman or a man. All right? So we can work with Venus and Mars on a soul song or a birth chart to look at the feminine and the masculine intents. And we can also look at these overtones, the global quest of the goddess, the global quest of the masculine. All right, so here's Hillary Clinton's birth chart. Now, this 8:02 a.m. time is up for debate. I sometimes wonder if it was more like 11 p.m. because that would have shifted the moon from Pisces into Aries. Again, I'm showing some of my own personal bias here and I'm not afraid to. So I could shift this to a sunrise chart. I could shift it to a natural house system chart with Aries on the rise. One thing I will do is take this to whole sign. But look, just don't concern yourself with the houses for now. All right. We're not going to worry so much about that. In fact, I'll take the ascendant out of here. Really what we're going to be looking at is Venus and Mars, and also this Venus Synodic Cycle. All right, so what's up with Venus and Mars on Hillary Clinton's chart? Here's Venus in Scorpio, the sorceress, the enchantress, yeah? The shamanic intent of the art of the heart, breaking it open, the authentic expression and experience of the deepest passions, desires, and excitements, letting life force lead the way. In its higher octaves, and some of the lower octaves, secrecy and these kinds of things. We look at Venus right here, conjunct Chiron, pretty close to a retrograde Mercury. All right. And this is not a shamanic astrology thing because shamanic astrology doesn't do rulerships, but I study many astrological kung fus. Well, Venus traditionally in Scorpio, this is one of the domiciles of Mars. All right. So she's kind of asking Mars for permission to do what she wants to do. And she's in a pretty dang strong square to Mars. In modern rulership, Scorpio ruled by Pluto. Well, hey, that square is there too because Venus has this Hillary has this very strong conjunction between Mars and Pluto. Gary Caton brings in this imagery that I very much love of who rose first, Mars or Venus. Is this a statement of whether a soul is a little more devoted to the masculine or feminine energies? Mars rose first for Hillary in Leo, which rises before Scorpio. And this, in the ways of old, is said to be Mars overcoming Venus. He's also casting a ray onto her by square. Mars in Leo, interesting study. Leo traditionally ruled by the sun. Well, Mars and the sun by whole sign alignment are in mutual reception. So Mars is kind of in a place of power. And Mars in Leo. Okay, so some of the energies of the king. But look at Mars conjunct Pluto. And now we're bringing in the essences of control and power, some of the strange ways of Pluto and Hades. And do we see that in the essence of Hillary Clinton? I would suggest we're seeing it more and more and more. All right, so this is a pretty interesting study. In one essence, we could say that Hillary Clinton, though she is a woman, is definitely keyed much more strongly to the masculine impulse. Mars and Leo in mutual reception to the Sun, conjunct Pluto, overcoming Venus who lives in his sign, and Venus may be exploring some of the soul wounds of Scorpio, and we could talk about the burning of the witches and stuff like that. So the reclamation of the beauty of magic could be one of the wonderful ways that this could come through. Losing ourselves to dark magic would be another way that it comes through. Suit yourself. Now, if the moon was in Pisces at Hillary's birth and with Jupiter in Sagittarius, its sign of rulership, we see some of the spiritual quest hopefully balancing this out and providing a way for Venus and Mars to make nice. Is that happening? Who am I to say? And I could go deep into astrological delineation on this birth chart all day, but I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do is look at Sky Engine and to see which global goddess overtone Hillary is here to participate with. I forget I have to add a transit ring. This program is just too cool. Sky Engine and Intrepid folks. Alright, so Venus, shamanic astrology at the time of Hillary Clinton's birth. And it will take just a little second here, but it was she was in a Scorpio cycle. Okay, so not only does Hillary have a Scorpio Venus, but she was also born to participate with the quest of the Scorpio global goddess. I'm reclaiming my magic, my power, my heart's expression, and its light. What are some of the other energies of the other octanes or octaves of Scorpio? You be the judge. Where is she born in it? Well, Venus had been through her death and rebirth, and she's climbing back up to reclaim her goods. Specifically where? Okay, when Venus separates herself in the evening sky by 10 degrees from the sun, she first shows herself in the west, and then every time the moon comes around, she starts reclaiming her goods, starting from the root and ending with the crown. So this first Venus Luna or Moon conjunction, which was October 14th, 1947 in that cycle, is the reclamation of root chakra. And Hillary was born very shortly after that, October 26th, 1947. So in shamanic astrology, we would say that Hillary has a Scorpio Venus, the feminine intent of the enchantress, the sorceress, living by the life force. I like to call it the art of the heart's yoga. She's also devoted to a global quest for the feminine to pursue the Scorpio interests. And where she is in the cycle, it's been through the death and rebirth, very Scorpionic thing, and she's come back up and reclaimed the root chakra. Yeah, kind of our structure, our power, what makes us feel safe, these kinds of things. But if it's there and hasn't yet reclaimed the sacral, which is rather scorpionic, the solar plexus, yeah, more of a power thing, maybe some of what this Leo, Mars, and Pluto are looking for, hasn't reclaimed the heart, these kinds of things, well, we're on our way to reclaiming that. So hopefully this is bringing some more imagery forth that we see not only in Hillary's soul song, but also in the scene that her chart is a frame within. Yeah, in this respect of the global quest of the goddess. All right, we could do this with Mars as well, and perhaps I'll do that another time. But for now, we are going to shift on to another candidate. Let's go with Ted Cruz, a rather younger man, Ted Cruz. Hillary born in 1947, and Ted Cruz born, I believe, in 1970 in Canada. Alright, so here's Ted Cruz's chart. So first of all, Venus and Mars. Venus also in Scorpio, like it was for Hillary Clinton. Mars in Scorpio. Jupiter in Scorpio. Alright, so there's a lot of scorpionic intent here. Let's also not worry about this rising sign. Maybe I'll shift this over to whole sign. I don't really care about that right now. I'm looking at Venus and Mars, what are they doing? And of course I would want to know the rising sign and birth time, the true birth time, so I could look at Venus and Mars and what house they are in, this kind of thing. I can't guarantee you Ted Cruz was born at this sign and they live in his third or second, depending on the house system you use. And I don't care so much for this particular journey. Alright, so Venus is cohabitating with Mars and Jupiter, all in Scorpio, traditionally one of Mars's domiciles. And Mars's feminine domiciles. Mars rose first, alright? He's not, so this is a Mars first chart or more of a masculine impulse chart. There's also this very interesting alignment to his Venus, an opposition from a retrograde Saturn. Alright, so astrologers, do your thing there. But this might be Saturn in Venus's sign of Taurus trying to shut down some of the feminine impulse that's tuned again to the Scorpio intent. Alright, so that's a pretty strong astrological aspect that he's probably trying to make it through a little bit. I find it really interesting that the asteroid goddess of relationship, Juno, is very strongly conjunct to Saturn, mythologically her father who ate her, okay? And Jupiter broke her out, or Zeus. Anyway, this is a very strong aspect. Is it trying to shut down some of the feminine impulse? Mars rising first, in a way dominating Venus, who lives in his sign of Scorpio. Is that some of the imagery that we bring forth? What about Venus in her synodic cycle? Ted Cruz born December 22nd, 1970. What was Venus doing then in her synodic cycle? So I'll add a transit ring and we will check out Sky Engine and look at the shamanic astrology vision for the global goddess at that time. And here we go. Alright, so this is also a Scorpio cycle. So though Ted Cruz was born, 23 years after Hillary Clinton, well, the Venus cycles repeat every 8 years. Alright, so 23, 24 in this zone. This is going to be that Scorpio vertex of the Venus pentagram. I think maybe I should show it up here where Scorpio lives. Coming through again. Now remember, Hillary was here after the goddess had gone through her death and rebirth and was beginning to reclaim her goods. Ted Cruz is born at the very beginning of the cycle. Alright, so the Scorpio cycle comes after, in our current time, and as it was at the time of Ted Cruz's birth, it comes after the Aries cycle. Alright, so Aries, traditionally Mars. Scorpio, traditionally Mars. Venus is, in a way, investigating some of the energies traditionally associated with Mars. She's just transitioning from having spent 584 days on an Aries quest into a new Scorpio quest. And he's born in the descent phase. Really, she hasn't even climbed to her height before she begins the descent, before she removes the clutter of her crown chakra. That would have been December 24th, 1970, when for shamanic astrology, when the moon conjuncted Venus after she stationed direct. Alright, so this is a bright morning star Venus. You know, she's pretty far separate from the sun. In fact, she's 43 degrees from the sun. That's almost as high as she can get in the morning sky, which is about 47, sometimes 48 degrees. So that's a really beautiful thing. She's following Mars on the way up there. Jupiter's coming next, all three of them visible in the sign of Scorpio. And that's something that I love. They're also following the moon, who lives in Libra, Venus's sign, but conjunct Uranus. So again, we could go deep into the astrological delineation. I mean, speaking of governance and this kind of thing, at least in modern thought of what Capricorn is, it's pretty interesting that Ted Cruz is born like in the moments of winter solstice, right? The sun at 1 minute Capricorn, at least if this birth time for him is correct. And I see I'm showing 12 a.m. now. I think the time that I had read for him was 1 a.m., but regardless, a winter solstice sun. And again, I'm not going to go so deep into this class. So again, just as far as the masculine feminine essence, Scorpio Mars, in a way overcoming Venus, Mars rose first. She lives in his sign of Scorpio, and maybe a very strong challenge from a retrograde Saturn in Taurus conjunct Juno opposing Venus. It is a very strong aspect. So let's leave it there for now. Let me just say that one more thing. That Cruz is kind of in this idea of the global goddess, also intent for bringing that magic, that art of the heart back. Okay, but at the very beginning of the quest, and this alignment from Saturn's probably going to make that a little bit of a challenge. Mars is the sacred sword that cuts, hopefully will help out. Let's stay Republican for a moment and check out this strong champion for the feminine essence, Donald Trump. Jeez. All right, so let's see, Mr. Trump. Again, I'm not sure of the birth time. I don't know if he's Leo rising. If he was born at 10:54 a.m., which is a time I took from, the internet, well, look at Mars is right on his ascendant. All right, unlike Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz, Donald Trump had Venus first. Right? Is the feminine impulse stronger than the masculine for him? Well, with Mars right at the ascendant, if this is his birth time, there's a place of power for Mars there. Mars in Leo, looking to the sun perhaps. Venus in Cancer. So the energies of the masculine and its light as the honorable, radiant king. Leo, and its shadow, maybe some of that, I need the spotlight, I need the stage stuff that we read about Leo in the newspapers, whatever. Okay, well, what about Venus? Cancer, the energy of the nurturing mother. Wouldn't that be sweet to have in this time of the emerging divine feminine and in this Leo cycle for the goddess to take her throne back? All right, but is it allowed to come through? I mean, look at this conjunction between Venus and Saturn at the time of Donald Trump's birth. Pretty strong. We see a lot of the Cancer impulse, but Saturn might give it a hard time for it to come through. Now Saturn is wisdom, all right, but wisdom earned, right? The breakthrough, but the breakthrough from the obstacles, the freedom from the cage. Has he found his freedom yet? We should hope so. Is he showing us that? Is he showing us a true, beautiful intent of the feminine essence for the way of nurturing? Yeah, Cancer. Or is he showing us some of the more shadowy Cancer energies here? Well, Cancer, the family, the tribe, the team, the crew, all right? Hey, this is about my people. I'm going to build a wall and keep everybody else out. Is that some of the way that Saturn is telling Venus to behave in Cancer instead of asking her to bring forth that energy of nurturing? Traditionally, Cancer, the principal domicile, the only domicile of the moon. Are we going to look to the moon in his chart? The moon in Sag, is that going to take me to Jupiter in Libra, who's Venus? We see this dispositorship of moon and Jupiter and Venus kind of playing along. But there's a special thing about the moon at the time of Donald Trump's birth. He was born in the minutes of a total lunar eclipse. All right, so this Sagittarius moon, which might bring forth some of the spiritual wisdom, is totally unseen. It's in the shadow of the earth. I'll leave the rest to you to make up your mind about what that might mean. Okay, now let's look where Donald Trump was within the quest of the global goddess, the Venus Synodic Cycle. So we'll add a transit ring and run Sky Engine. And it'll take a few seconds. Please bear with me. All right. In an Aries quest. All right, so again, Aries, like Scorpio for Hillary Clinton, synodically, Scorpio for Ted Cruz, synodically, also in both of those natives' natal charts. We're looking at a sign traditionally associated with Mars, Scorpio and Aries. Donald Trump is born pretty far along the Venus quest. She's been through her death and rebirth experience, and she's rising up. So where in the chakras is she in the reclamation project? And we're going to see, this is him now. After Venus reached 10 degrees from the sun, we start kind of clocking our way through the moon gates with every moon-Venus conjunction. This is the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, and it's heading for the heart, which came about 15 or 16 days after Trump's birth. All right, so here we go. Just in summary, Venus, for the first of these three candidates that we've looked at, is rising before Mars. Trump is Venus first. However, Venus in ways is very much challenged by the structures and the obstacles of Saturn conjunct Venus in Cancer. When we look to the moon, the traditional ruler of Cancer, well, the moon's in the moment of a total lunar eclipse. So this is looking for the moon, in a sense, to bring that energy so she can really unfold Venus, and the moon can't be seen. It's in the Earth's shadow. I find a lot of profound imagery there alone. Mars, perhaps right at the ascendant in Leo, we don't know without knowing Donald Trump's birth time. And Venus in this portion of her quest, an Aries quest of having reclaimed the solar plexus chakra, for me, which is where the sun, and in essence Leo, lives. All right, so it's really tuned into the masculine energies. Even though Venus rose first, she's challenged in so many different ways. And we see Jupiter perhaps being one of the great gifts, balance in Libra, for Donald to kind of bring Cancer Venus online and to help release some of the Saturn fears and obstacles to make them mastery, strength, breakthrough. But is that going to happen? Well, here Jupiter totally conjunct Chiron, conjunct Juno as well. Until there's a balanced relationship, maybe we don't move through the sacred wounds of the soul in regards to that Libra principle and can't access the spiritual wisdom of Jupiter. Does that make sense? Speaking of making sense, let's check out the chart for Bernie Sanders, your future president. Again, my bias revealed. Now, typically, I'm not one to get too deep into politics. I'm kind of in agreement with a great modern philosopher and mystic of our time, Neil Kramer, when he says politics is the entertainment division of empire. However, every now and then someone comes around that feels like they are carrying honor. Pretty rare in that world. And Bernie Sanders, at least, is speaking about things that are true to my own feelings of the mess of the world at this time and its release. And I look forward to creating a couple other videos about some correlations in the times now to the times when Franklin Roosevelt emerged as our president astrologically, which I find very interesting. So here's Bernie's chart, and we're looking at, and again, birth time here, unsure. So I could set him to a sunrise chart or to a natural house system chart. I'm really not concerned with that because I'm looking at Venus and Mars primarily. What's up with Venus and Mars in this chart? Venus, the goddess, the feminine, in her native sign of Libra. All right, so she's pretty stoked, yeah? And then Mars in Aries, in his natural sign, right? One of his domiciles. Mars is masculine domicile, conjunct the Aries moon. Now Mars is retrograde, and the old ways have a hard time with that, and so to speak. But Mars is in strength in Aries, and not in mutual reception, but in this beautiful aspect to Venus. Venus in her domicile of Libra, Mars in his of Aries, in this very strong opposition. Does opposition mean that there is opposition between Venus and Mars, between the yin and the yang? Not necessarily. And is this a Venus first chart or a Mars first chart, as I looked at with the other candidates? Well, this is one of these rare times in the dance of Venus and Mars when they're really in balance, they're really in equality. That can happen when Venus and Mars are conjunct, and therefore they rise and culminate and set at the same time. And when they're in opposition like this, well, Mars is setting as Venus rises. Venus is setting as Mars rises. So it's not necessarily Venus first or Mars first. If we had to go either way with this one, we would maybe say Mars first, but look at it, it's such a strong opposition. Really, they're in equality, they're in balance, and this is what Venus seeks. And I think this is what we seek now, yeah? With the emergence of the lioness, the roaring feminine, yeah, with this Leo-Venus Synodic Cycle quest, the quest of the global goddess, are we looking to shift from patriarchy to matriarchy? And it's been said that that kind of shift has happened throughout the course of time. We don't really know. I would like to see an age of balance, the prophesized age of the child. Personally, there's a really interesting conversation in the comments of a post I recently wrote about carrying either the mother's name or the father's name, as most cultures today do. And I'd love to see us carry both. But then I was trying to vision forth what that would look like for me. Do I use my mother's maiden name? Well, her maiden name came from her father. So do I use my mother's mom's maiden name and take it all the way up the maternal line for my mother and the paternal line for my father? Who's to say? And that's a really strange trip. And then how far back do we go? We would really know our roots if we held that throughout the course of time. Anyway, how about balanced thrones for the feminine and the masculine? How about no thrones at all? How about we're all in balance? Is this democratic socialism? And as much as we've been taught to fear that word, and as much as I personally do have some reservations in that regard, it certainly seems to be a more beautiful thing than control by the banksters or whatever, which certainly is our scene at this time. And it's nice to have our attention called to that once again, because clearly this recent financial collapse, which didn't collapse all the way, I guess, brought our attention there, but maybe not enough to really think about the solution. And maybe that's a promise of the coming time. And it's really incredible to see this underdog, Bernie Sanders, bringing the Bern. We're feeling the Bern, you know. He's doing some amazing things in that regard. So I try not to track politics. I try to send my attention to what I feel are more important quests, but I think the political current at this time, because it's resonating so much with what I see as problems and solutions in the world, especially in the speech of Bernie Sanders, it's become very interesting to me again. I was last interested when Obama first ran, and the whole idea of hope and whatever, and I was kind of behind that, and then I just felt totally deceived and shut myself down again. I remember just having this incredible laughter at one point after I felt like he had let me down, and I looked at his book on my shelf and it says, "The Audacity of Hope." So was he ever really running on hope in the first place? Anyway, I digress, and here's a lot of my personal bias and why I pretend like I don't have that. So, all right, Venus in Libra, all right, in her sign, in balance with Mars in Aries in his sign. All right, and I could get into the sun and the moon and all these different aspects of delineation. I love this trine from Venus to Jupiter in Gemini, and we could go on and on. But right now we are going to look at the Venus Synodic Cycle, or the quest for the global goddess that Bernie's chart or soul song suggests that he was here to participate with. I'll run Sky Engine, and we will look at the shamanic astrology paradigms image for the synodic Venus cycle at the time of Bernie's birth. So take just a little bit to come in. And here we go. All right, so this was a Cancer quest. All right, so Venus is in Libra, his personal statement and intention for the divine feminine essence to come through. And also the way we as men often project that onto the others until we claim it within the sacred marriage, the Hieros Gymos. But where was she in the quest? What archetype was she devoted to? Cancer, the essence of the nurturing mother, the place of birth in many ways, and the first sign in the wheel of life that brings the heart online. Bernie's pretty far along in this Cancer Venus synodic quest, okay? She had risen, she had descended into the underworld, she came back, and she's on her way to reclaiming all of her goods. Specifically where? Well, here's Bernie's birth date, September 8th, 1941, all right? Venus separated herself from the sun by 10 degrees and would have risen in the west around May 26th of 1941, and the moon first came along on May 26th on that same date. So here's root chakra about a month later. Here is the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, and the heart on August 25th. So Bernie is born in a Cancer Venus synodic cycle, the global goddess, bringing back the true essence of nurturing, of family, of tribe, of caring, okay? The waters of the heart in the way that we share them and nurture others. And on the way back up for this goddess in her 584-day synodic cycle or quest, having reclaimed the powers of the heart and now moving on the way to the throat. And the expression, perhaps, and the sharing of truth. And there's one more thing I would say about that, is that Cancer Venus synodic cycle that Bernie was born into has since shifted. That vertex of the Venus pentagram has now shifted into Gemini. All right, it is the Venus cycles where we had the two Venus transits of our lifetimes in June of 2004 and of 2012, when the body of the goddess Venus could actually be seen visibly between us and the solar disk, all right, the orb of great mystery. And in many ways, and not only for this reason, but also for this reason, because Venus makes her transits in our lifetime in the sign of Gemini, perhaps it is that vertex of the Venus pentagram that shows Venus in the strength. Maybe this is one of the 5 overtones that Venus is really most at home right now, coming into the expression of truth. Yeah, the storyteller and the trickster devoted to eternal youth as well, Gemini, in its light. All right, so this Venus Cancer synodic cycle that Bernie was born into, in the place where goddess was had reclaimed her heart and was moving to the throat. Well, it's very interesting that cycle has since shifted from Cancer, maybe more of a water heart focus, into Gemini, maybe more of a throat and communication focus. All right, so clearly in this investigation of the soul songs, the Venus synodic cycle for the 4 primary presidential candidates at this time, Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders, I believe my biases are confirmed that though one is a woman, one holds more of the feminine essence and the commitment to bringing forth an age of balance than any of the others, and that is not the woman, that is Bernie Sanders. Feel the burn, baby. Thank you for watching this strange and rare journey through political space for me. This is your friendly astrolonaut, Gemini Brett, signing off. Love and planets.